Good evening, folks. Welcome again to another session of Career Talks. I am your host, as always, and consistently, Orlando Haynes. Super excited, and I say that all the time. I need to brand these or trademark these terms because. Oh, here we go. I think my mic was muted all that time. So, welcome again, folks, to the Career Talks podcast. Super excited, but always week over week, try to be as consistent as possible with this in bringing you, relevant content for job seekers that are, from experts in the field, whether it be other recruiters, diversity and inclusion, human resources practitioners, career coaches, etc. And I know I've been knowing this young lady here for a number of years. We actually work together in the staffing agency, and she always and consistently presented herself, more of a boutique type recruiter versus the kind of, blast over several resumes and hope one sticks. So I'm super excited that we followed each other's career and stay in contact throughout here on LinkedIn. And I'm able to get her on and talk to her and dive into her tech mind expertise about the market. So without further ado, Miss Angelica Chadwick, how are you?
Hi, Orlando. I'm great. Thank you for the nice intro. It was very nice. But yeah, definitely mutual respect for one another, I think, all these years. And I'm excited to be here. I've seen a lot of your talks, and it's exciting to be part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So our time together back then. But before we get into that, share with the folks exactly what you do and where your expertise lies.
Yeah. So, basically, I'm an IT recruiter. But I've been doing this for 20 years, specifically in the technology arena. So, recruiting can be a pretty crazy and hectic, very fast paced, sometimes very unforgiving career. But I absolutely love it because I have a real passion for just, I think, helping people at the core. And so when I can help clients, companies, hiring managers, and candidates sort of come together and marry each other, in long time career opportunities, that's what I love to do. So for 20 years, I've been in IT recruiting. Currently, I'm the managing director of the technology practice in the Tampa Bay, or Central Florida, I should say, market for StevenDouglas. And a little bit about StevenDouglas. We've been around for 37 years. We are a boutique firm. We are the largest firm in Florida. Although we do have different offices across the country, different teams and different specialty groups. But again, I run our tech practice here in the Tampa Bay market and really Central Florida. Have a really large portfolio of clients as well that I work and consult with clients on. So we have over 100 clients, I think, right now. But I've worked with over, I can't even tell you, 500 companies over the years. Wow. It's probably the most craziest time in the job market that there ever has been, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. We are all feeling the pain consistently. We are united, kumbaya, in this search for talent. But even more so. So I appreciate you sharing with the folks, your history. And anyone who's watching, feel free to comment, have a question for Angelica. We'll fill those questions out to her even after the broadcast as well. So the demand for tech talent. So where does from your perspective, coming from the staffing world, I'm on the corporate side now, but what are you seeing in dealing with, employers? What's the demand out there, and what's the landscape like?
It's the highest demand I've seen. I've definitely over 2 decades of seen candidate-driven markets. Definitely, sort of the ebb and flow of that. But right now, everybody's hiring. Everybody's hiring numerous talent within each organization. Across from software development to IT leadership roles. Prior to even the pandemic that started last year, there was a lot of companies already going through digital transformation, disrupting their industries, figuring out how to be number one in their fields. And that's really just continued and really elevated through the pandemic, with companies trying to figure out how to, move their workforce remotely, when everybody, for the most part, unless you were an essential employer, had to do. I see my little kitties walking around back
Yeah.
there.
They're getting their 2 minutes.
Part of this.
Right.
I just lost my train of thought on that, though. But with a lot of companies, having to move their workforce remotely, that heightened a lot of different roles and security and sort of infrastructure related staff and talent. But then on top of that, the disrupting and the digital transformations have only elevated. If you didn't have a presence online, or if you're a retailer and people couldn't shop online with you before, forget about the brick and mortar. It's all about e-commerce. And so, that's nothing new, but it's definitely elevated in this world. Even as an example, I have a client that all they do is they're a one-stop shop for faith and church organizations across the country. They actually build software, ERP software, business software to run their business, because they are a business every day. But then I also think about when you couldn't go into a church or another, an organization. They've got online streaming. You don't have to go to church anymore. You can do online streaming via Facebook or Instagram or any other sort of platform. Online giving and tidings. So if you think about even that one example, and how much how many more developers they had to hire, and how many more quality assurance folks and web development individuals that they had to hire. So everybody is just on fire. Everybody wants to hire, and the demand for tech has never been more than I've ever seen it. I really equate it to the housing market, which I think most of us are very familiar with. A house goes for sale and it can sell 20 offers in a day. It's so crazy. I mean, I've actually been on the market myself, my husband and I, since the beginning of the year. We had planned to move in 2021, and 10 months later, we're still here because every single home has 20 offers on it, and they're above asking offer, at sight unseen sometimes. And so as I talk to clients and new companies specifically, and I ask them if they know what the landscape of the hiring IT talent market looks like, I really sort of compare it to the housing market, because every candidate out there, for the most part, in different specialties and niches, is having 10 to 30, 40, the sky's the limit with recruiters reaching out to them. They almost can't even look at their LinkedIn profiles right now. They almost can't even get distracted from all of the want, and everybody wants. So the talent isn't really applying to any companies. They're not applying to jobs for the most part. They're getting hit up by so many recruiters looking for that talent. And so they have the pick of the litter. They have the upper hand. And companies are also throwing more money at candidates. They're giving sign-on bonuses. They're being creative with setting up their office spaces. I have a client that offers $750 to every single new hire to boost their office space, where to make sure that they're comfortable in that remote situation. And then, speaking of remote, although some companies are thinking about and talking about bringing their people back into the office, not really successful with the IT candidate market. And I think I don't think it's real specific just to technology, but specifically that's the world I live in. So I'll speak to that. It's not really about COVID. It's just about the flexibility of the last 18 months that people have gotten accustomed to. And so if you're not offering that, you're also, you're not in the competitive game anymore. So it's just been really interesting and a crazy ride the past 18 months, and specifically this year. So just to put it in a little perspective too, as a boutique recruiting firm, executive search firm, I would say 20 searches is really good to be working on, 20 solid searches.
Right.
We have over 250 right now.
That's insane. Now, is that across the organization or just with what you're handling? Because I know we talked offline before this.
Yeah, so I have a team here that focuses in Central Florida, and then we have a massive team in South Florida in Fort Lauderdale where we're headquartered. That's just combining our two teams in Florida in
Wow.
the tech practice group. That's it. We're not talking about accounting and finance or HR, sales and marketing, operations, and we do have a retained search group. So it's not counting any of those.
Wow. Insane. Insane.
you know,
Completely insane.
in the beginning you start, you say, oh, this is a great problem to have. It's a great problem to have when you're at 30 and 40 and 50 and 60 roles. Wow, this is a great problem to have. And then you're just like, it's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you just can't, and we can't necessarily as a firm handle that many searches. So I don't want to also mistake anybody's thoughts on how we're handling those searches and the
Mhm.
ability to cover those searches. Because to your point in the beginning intro, um, I'm not a transactional recruiter and our firm is not a transactional firm. And so we're not just throwing resumes against the wall to see what sticks. We are having very, very detailed, vetted conversations with candidates, multiple conversations with candidates before they get in front of our hiring managers. So we have to use, specifically, I use an agile recruiting methodology to really help prioritize and make sure that we're delivering to our top clients. And that's just really the only way that we could handle that many searches. So while we have that many, we're definitely not covering all of them because all of them aren't being prioritized for a number of different reasons.
Got it. So here's a question in terms of what you were talking about earlier with the developers. Are you seeing more of a need in a specific area of tech versus, like, and I'm gonna throw some dated ones, C# developers versus a .NET developer, versus a Salesforce architect versus a MuleSoft architect? Like, is there a demand more in one's focus, or it's just developers across the board?
I think it's developer. I mean, for us, it's developers across the board, but I say your .NET stack, which is C# and .NET,
Mhm.
your Java developers, that's another lane. And then you've got what we call like open stack, open source technology. So MERN stack and mean stack positions, which are using JavaScript for, so they're basically JavaScript developers that have experience with like React and Node. Depends on the front end or back end, but it really. So I would say the niche ones like a MuleSoft or Salesforce, definitely those roles are heightened as well than they normally are because you see usually, a couple of those, and now you're seeing, any company that is working and has Salesforce. Workday is another hot one,
Mhm.
and MuleSoft, and numerous different ERP packages and CRM packages out there that people are using. But number one is just developers in those different tech stacks that I mentioned.
Now, are you saying that because companies are trying to develop a stronger, build their technology base stronger to be more competitive, or just get ahead of the pace of the interchanging things that go on within technology?
I think it's mostly it's adding a lot of new features. So if it's not a startup company, which we happen to work a lot with, if it's not a startup
Mhm.
company that is building a new product, a new a new software application, a web application, a mobile app, um, existing companies that have been successful, whether it's retail or healthcare, finance, or pure software as a service company, everyone's adding new features and new features into what the experience is for a user like you and I. So it doesn't matter if you're logging onto a portal for your doctor's office, right?
Mhm.
Or you're shopping online. Everybody is very much focused on the user experience. And so that's actually another big, big hot one right now, or has been for a long time, is UI UX developers and designers. And
Mhm.
again, those are creating a better experience, a user experience for how you and I navigate an application or a website or even a mobile app, for example. So it's a lot of new features being added constantly to just be competitive, more competitive, because the more ease of use you have for your products, the more you're going to keep your customers and your clients.
Got it. Got it. So when it comes to having with pay, because you touched on it earlier, some folks are 30, 40. Is pay with that pay increase, people are reaching for a little bit more. Do you think that's sustainable? It's just like the housing market, like you said. So candidates are definitely leveraging that and taking advantage of that for their benefit. So, do you see that being sustainable for these companies to be paying talent 30 plus grand over their skill set, their current skill set?
It's hard to say, to be honest. I mean, I think that, definitely it's overall, I've seen salaries go up about 30%. But now in some markets, it's really absolutely unattainable for them to even hire talent. So, as an example, uh, we have, I actually know somebody that I used to work with here in this market that's in the Chicago market right now, an executive IT leader. And he's having a hard time even hiring Java developers, as an example, because paying 30% more than they're used to paying. So I'll give you a figures. 130, let's say, would have been the average for a senior Java developer. So now they've pushed that up to 150, 160, which is great. It's a very respectable salary for a developer. But there are some companies that have such deep pockets that they're literally going up to 250 and higher for some of these positions. So, in fact, he saw a post that I made on LinkedIn, and he reached out and he said, "Yeah, I can't compete with 300,000 a year for a developer." And I'll be honest with you, we actually have some of those clients that are willing to pay that much. Now, they're real specific roles, so it's not every Java developer or C++ developer. They're in financial services, trading, very complex algorithms that need to be part of that person's experience. Strong, very strong math. You'd think all developers are strong at math, and I don't want to make any developer mad out there. I'm not saying that you aren't, but some are just stronger, more gifted in that area, and you can work on more complicated development types of initiatives. You're seeing prices like that go up, and so it's really
That's crazy.
It's pretty insane. Yeah,
it's
pretty insane.
And what level of
I don't
experience?
think it's sustainable.
Right. That definitely not. I'm in the wrong business if that.
That's how most of my kids need to be in software engineering.
Exactly. So those are the one-offs, right? Those are the unicorns that are out there. And what level of experience? 8 years, 10 years, 5 years?
10 years. Yeah.
Really? And this is not a leadership role, or is it just a individual contributor role?
Individual contributor roles.
Wow.
Yeah. Which then they are making more than the leaders are.
Yeah.
And that's to be understood right now for the talent and to get the things that they need accomplished. Wow.
So when it comes to just the inflation of 30%, let's stay around there because that's more of the common right now, which is weird to even say. When it comes to the candidate, what are they looking for, developers? And again, we talked about this offline. What are you seeing from the candidates saying, yeah, the salary is great, but X, I'm going to turn this down because of X?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not just about money. Of course, everybody wants to make as much as they could possibly make, and that's great. But I think overall, I'm not seeing, at least the developers, the talent pool that we're talking to and placing on a regular basis. It really has to do with the whole package of, well, I don't want to say package because I'm not even referring to compensation, but what is the culture like at this company? What is the makeup of the team like? What am I going to be working on? Developers tend to like to work on new development, new projects, new features. If you're hiring somebody who is just going to come in and keep the lights on and maintain a software application for you or a legacy product, that's not as exciting. So you're not going to get really the top talent to hire. And I think for the most part, companies realize that they don't necessarily need top talent for those types of positions, but the ones that are really sought after and in demand, they're really just looking for a better place to work. And I put a poll out there on LinkedIn. It was my one and only one that I've done so far. I had to get in, I had to jump on the bandwagon, but it's really about the Great Resignation. And of course, now I'm hearing, more of a term called the Great Reset. But whatever you want to call it. Right. I was thinking this poll would turn up the highest percentage would be on money. And it was actually culture. Yep. So I think it's really important as a recruiter I'm constantly trying to make sure that I'm working with hiring managers. Not that I don't respect my beloved talent acquisition folks and HR, internal recruiters at companies, because absolutely do, and they're a very important part of the process of hiring anybody.
But we don't work on the projects. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I can speak to a manager and I can actually find out, like, why do you like to work here? What's kept you here? So, like if somebody's been there 10 years, why have you stayed at this company this long? How can I sell the opportunity? Because the most important thing is selling the opportunity. I hate to use the word selling, but for lack of a better word, is because I'm a representation of that company. And so I have to really do a good job. My team has to do a really good job with really representing the company and being a true partner. And so that's kind of where you go from that transactional recruiting partner to more boutique style recruiting partner, because you don't want, you don't want to bring a recruiting partner in that's all they're doing is taking a job description and mass mailing, mass emailing or mass LinkedIn messaging, 200 people. And then
say that part one more time. Say that part one more time.
So you don't want to, you want to be weary of a recruiting partner. And most of the time, companies don't know that their recruiting partner is doing this, but they're taking a job description and just mass mailing as many people as they can, whether it's from their database, whether it's from LinkedIn, and not really looking for the best talent. Now, that is a time saver, I guess, but I've just never worked that way. And as a firm, we don't work that way, which is why it's a great fit for me to be at StevenDouglas with my team. But when I take the time to really, and the manager takes their time to meet with me, so we can really go through and understand why is this position open? How many people are on the team? What are you going to expect from this person the first 30 days, the first 90 days, the first 6 months, year? To understand those things, to be able to reiterate those things to a candidate, really important, because developers really want to know what they're getting into. And They have all kinds of complaints in their current situations. And so, yes, money can be there. There are people that are very underpaid, and they're seeing that or recognizing that now because they're getting inundated with a lot of recruiters reaching out to them. But for the most part, they really want to be valued. And just like anybody else, right? We want to be heard. We want to have a voice. We want to understand, what's our contribution going to be like to this company. And also, what's the style of the hiring manager? I think it's really important. When I meet with a hiring manager, I always say, what would one of the developers on your team, how would they describe you as a manager? And they're always like, oh, that's a good, I don't know. I hope they would say this or that. But I'm really trying to use that information to then talk with a candidate to excite them about if they're missing strong leadership or mentorship or kudos from their existing hiring manager or company, to be able to say with confidence and being genuine, this is how this manager works. This is how they value their team. That means the world. So that will help replace that person from going for this job or this job at the highest salary. Recently, I had a candidate that I placed before, actually, and I worked with him before, was interviewing with 2 of our clients. And he was more interested in one role over the other role. On paper, very similar, but he was more interested in one position because the hiring team that he was interviewing with was more engaged with him. So that's the other thing, right? It's not just about the client and the hiring manager interviewing candidate. It's a two-way street. The candidate is interviewing you, and they have so many different opportunities in front of them. This is a little small shot of what, picture of what it might be like to work for this director or this manager and with this team. And oftentimes the developers, or in many tech roles, you're interviewing, there's a couple of steps in the process. So it's, initial conversation to get to know each other, kind of make sure this could be a good fit. You're interested in the role after you hear a little bit more from the manager. Then you meet maybe with a few of the developers on the team and maybe go through a technical interview and more conversations. And so if the people on the other end of the screen are engaged with you and, they're excited to be talking to you, that really means a lot to a candidate. And, same thing goes for candidate interviewing. If you're not engaged with a hiring manager and manager feels like, oh, they seemed like they were bored in this interview, or they could care less, or they had somewhere else to go, that's not a good feeling for a manager either. But it goes both ways.
Right.
Both ways. So I think it's very, very important that, and I have these conversations with managers, that your team or whoever you're putting in front of the candidate to interview is doing a good job with selling your company, selling your
Absolutely.
team, selling the projects that you guys are working on. That's very important.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa, for the comment here. I'm just going to read it real quick. This is very timely. I was just telling a colleague of mine today that there are more Scrum Master roles available versus Scrum Masters that are actively looking for the roles. Obviously, so because recruiters are reaching out more and more via LinkedIn, they're starting off their introduction with pay benefits. And one of the things I've always looked at too was, at least now, especially now, that pay conversation should be in your first conversation, right? It used to be, oh, we'll get to that second, third conversation, but pay, you need to be upfront with the pay. Hey, we're looking at 100 plus. This is a remote or a hybrid situation. What are you thinking? Now, with that, are you seeing more folks now? And we know that technology, a lot of folks can work remote, period. Pre-COVID, current COVID, and I don't even know the current state of Florida because we both sit in Florida where we stand. But are you seeing a heightened sense now, even more for technology? Is like, well, there's no really need for me to be on site. This is a fully remote worker. That's a non-negotiable. Or are you seeing candidate flexibility on that, and employer side? Either way.
I would say 50%, it's a non-negotiable. Like, absolutely, they don't even want to have a conversation with you if this role is not 100% remote. The other 50%, hybrid. They just want flexibility. So if it's a local candidate being considered, they're okay with coming on site a couple days a week, but they do want that flexibility. They want to know that they're not going to be forced to do the commute every single day, right? Tampa Bay, is a good example of that because, with you and I both living here, Tampa Bay is very spread out. Clearwater, there's a bridge to get to St. Pete, there's a bridge to Tampa, Sarasota, so, it could, you're losing 2 hours of actual valuable work and time for, to spend, whether it's with your family or doing some errands and things like that. So I think it's really just more about the flexibility, but like I just said, 50% of the candidates out there, maybe it's a little bit higher, but non-negotiable. Like if it's, if they can't, and because so many have been working remotely. And so, what I tell hiring managers too is everybody's gainfully employed. There's very few people on the market that are not working. So 9 times out of 10, we're reaching out and actually truly headhunting candidates. We're not, as a firm, we have all the tools. StevenDouglas pays for a lot of tools for us in different job boards, but I'll be honest with you, we don't really use the job boards. We're trying to find the top talent for our client, and those people are working. So, what the message that I try to tell my hiring managers is, if they're expecting or wanting or demanding somebody to be on site, is everybody that I reach out to is already going to be working remotely, and they're not going to change. They're not going to change jobs to now come on site for 5 days. But if it's a great opportunity and there is some flexibility and they do happen to be a local candidate, then we'll have the conversation, but they got to know that there's that flexibility. But right now it's not even about hiring local candidates anymore, right? With this whole change of remote landscape, candidates can be anywhere, depending on, each company. I have some companies that will hire candidates anywhere. They don't care where they live, what state they're in, what time zone they're in. They'll accommodate if it's an Eastern, if the company's in Tampa, let's say, but they're hiring somebody in Arizona. I always ask, well, what are you going to expect this person to get up early to be part of a stand-up every day? But they actually work with everybody that's on the team where everybody sits, because everybody's sitting remotely and they're all dispersed. And then they then they come to an agreement at what time they do a stand-up, for example.
Right.
And I don't know if that's every company, but that is a lot of my clients. And so, and then I have other companies that will hire remote candidates as long as they're in, one of 3 states or one of 7 states, because they've had people in those different markets. They've already set up to do payroll there. And so they don't have to worry about, onboarding another, kind of state and payroll taxes and local taxes and all that things that come with payroll, right? And HR. So,
That makes sense.
that's the other thing that really has increased the reason that their salaries are so heightened, right? Is if you think about it, think about a company that's in San Diego, California, that's used to paying for a developer at $200,000 a year. That was a norm actually prior to COVID in some cases. So if they are hiring somebody in our market, in the Tampa Bay market now, at 175, which is a 30,000, 40,000 increase to what some of these candidates have been used to making or seeing jobs at here. The candidates winning out, they're getting a much higher salary, and the company in California is actually paying a little less than what they're used to.
Exactly. Now, what are your conversations like directly with employers, hiring managers, on their time to fill? Like, is that conversation like, hey, is this a 3-step interview process? How quick will you be making a decision? Because time is of the essence with these candidates. What are those conversations like?
That's a great question. I'm always asking, especially if it's a new client that I'm getting to know, what's the process look like? Let's go over the steps, and how quickly can we get through those steps? So, I have a client here as an example that, has 3-step process, sometimes 4, and pre-COVID, the final step would be coming in and meeting with a lot of different people in the organization. That was just their sort of style. You really had to meet with like 10 people after you'd already gone through numerous other steps. It could take a couple of weeks to get through that process. And so because they're listening to their recruiting partners and trying to adjust because they've lost candidates due to this lengthy process, they put an SLA out in the company that they will get through all of their steps in 1 week.
Wow.
1 week, and reduce that down from 3 weeks, which is huge. Some companies are definitely shortening their steps as well. Maybe doing a panel interview, a couple people on the interview instead of, one at a time. Because think about it, sometimes in the past, you'd come into an office, sit in a conference room, and one person would come in and interview with you. And thank you very much for your time. It was great to meet you. Next, and you get it all out of the way. So now it's different in the remote world, but I try to actually suggest to clients, even if we do it that way, if we can set the interviews up back to back and not spread over a course of different days, right? So if they have to interview with 3 different people, can we do that 1 to 1:30, 1:30 to 2, 2 to 2:30 or 3, and, get through those steps, and then do maybe one final after that if need be.
Yep. Make it a 3-4 hour day. Just pack the day.
Right. Yeah, it's but candidates are really, and again, because we were talking about developers a lot, but it's interesting how many interviews they can handle in this remote world. So I'm not really sure what their day-to-day jobs look like necessarily, but it is easier to interview because you don't have to leave the house and drive to to an office. They're also doing coding challenges though, so sometimes I think, wow, you guys, you're doing 2 or 3 different coding challenges. That's exhausting. So I've seen some of these candidates just go, you know what, I'm done. I can't, my brain, I don't have the capacity anymore. I'm doing my full-time job, and I've done 3 homework coding assessments this week. And, maybe they want to look at another opportunity, but they're exhausted from those types of interviews as well, because it's a step in the process for many companies. So not saying it's a bad step in the process. It's just, it's interesting how many are willing to do so many of these challenges and assessments so they can get a better position for themselves.
Wow. That's insane. Like how common is that with the coding challenge that you're seeing?
Oh gosh, I would say if we're looking at 10 clients, 8 out of the 10.
Really?
Yeah.
And at what stage of the process are they extending that?
Typically the second step. So typically there's a first conversation get to, kind of conversational, a little bit about, their experience, obviously. When a candidate comes from us, they get a lot of information already. I'm providing a lot of notes on the vetting and what they've done, kind of what their role has been on different teams and different projects. But so that first conversation is just more of a meet and greet, if you will. And, making sure they can answer questions that the candidate might have that maybe we couldn't answer, giving it a little bit more detail, getting a little bit more granular with some of the tech talk. And then from there, it's the coding assessment. So some of them are timed as well. So that's interesting. I have a client that will send, we'll schedule a time when the candidate can put aside 2 to 3 hours, whether that's in the evening or on the weekend. And then they get an email with the coding assessment, and they have to return it within like 3 hours.
Wow.
Now I don't want to say that's normal, not normal. That's not typical. Most of the times companies that are understanding these people are working, they're also putting their time into doing a coding assessment for us, which they appreciate. So, it's all about communicating and setting expectations. And, right now we have 2 candidates, with just one role in particular, that one candidate said, hey, I'll do it on Wednesday. The other one said, I'm going to do it on Friday. And the client's okay with that, as long as they know, okay, this is when they're going to put time aside to do that.
Got it. And I just had a question too, that it skipped my mind, but from, here's a question. So what's the feedback turnaround from a candidate when you're initiating, because of, you said earlier, they're getting bombarded from recruiters through LinkedIn. Are you seeing it takes maybe 3 days to get in contact, 4 days? Is it a week? How fast are the candidates responding to your inquiries?
You really have to be tenacious right now. And there's a fine line there, because I know, like myself in particular, and really the way that our firm works, we're not, because we're not mass emailing, and we're not, we're not bombarding somebody's space constantly to try to get them on the phone. I don't know that works really well. So it's a reach out, an initial reach out. If we don't have a phone number to get in contact with this person, it's a LinkedIn message, right? But because there are so many messages that they're getting, and so many of these messages are just scripted, and very impersonal. And so when somebody looks at a message from us and they see, genuine, like we actually looked through their profile, we actually notated things in their background and experience, that does get them to respond to us rather quickly if they saw our message.
Right.
Right. So that's the thing. You're getting 30, a day in your LinkedIn email. And then if, depending on which way you're getting notified, if you have LinkedIn on your phone, if you don't, that might come through an email. Do they check their personal emails all the time? Again, a lot of the candidates that we reach out to aren't necessarily looking. They're actually, they're keeping their eyes and ears open, but they're not necessarily having to leave. And so we are trying to entice candidates to talk to us, because we have a great position. We are representing a great company, but so, I tell clients right now, don't expect to get anybody from me for a week, maybe. And I want to set those expectations, because again, I'm not just going to throw 20 resumes at the wall to see which one sticks. I'm not sourcing for you. I'm vetting and having, meaningful conversations with candidates to see if they're interested, if they're the right fit for you, and vice versa. So it could take us 2 or 3 attempts, sometimes more, to actually reach out to candidates. And then some candidates get back to us 2 months later, and 3 months later, and the position's gone now. But, because they just either they just came up and, were able to get from under the water of all of the, messages coming from them, or they simply just kind of shut things off because it's too much. It's too much. Yeah.
I mean, that's a great point that you made, that you said we're not sourcing for you. I don't think I've ever heard, since switching, to the corporate side, an outside agency say those words. And I don't think most managers would understand it. They'd be like, "What do you mean you're not? That's what we're hiring you for." But I love that you said that. I love that you
Yeah,
made that distinction between,
that's
like,
really
hey,
important to
that's
me
huge.
personally.
Yeah.
I think you know that, but I think
Hmm.
it's one thing that I try to really emphasize with all of our clients, and why really interviewing your recruiting partners should be part of your process. And I don't know that that's done all the time. I offer a lot of information about the way that I work and our team works and our company works, but it's not actually asked of me, which is interesting. Nobody actually interviews us to become, a recruiting partner, unless of course we're, doing a retained search, and then
Hmm.
that's a completely different, situation. But I always ask I always like to ask clients too, if have you interviewed your recruiting partners, or are you reviewing them quarterly? Are you looking at metrics, and not how many people did they submit to you, but the quality of people coming to you, the accuracy of that candidate. Is that person a good fit for the role itself? I've Over the years, I tend to be brought in after several recruiting partners have just been, throwing resumes against the wall. This person's not even a fit. I got 5 resumes from this person. Nobody was a fit, and their managers are frustrated. So then it also makes our job harder to try to partner with somebody, because you got to prove that you're not like that. And the only way I could do that is to talk and explain how we do things. But until you get the opportunity to show how you can work, it's hard to prove that, because everybody says they're the best. Everybody says, all the right things. But
Right.
so that's why I like to say I don't mind being audited
Hmm.
by a client, and looking at our performance. You're not going to get the most resumes from us, but you're going to get sometimes the right one the first time, and that's it.
That's awesome. I love that you're saying that. That's really crucial. And I think that just shows the different level of thought process that you have when dealing with clients. It's a real partnership. Not great. Got another contract signed. Got them at the percent. The fee we wanted them. Let's look at some. Let's go to our database and shoot the first three over. Not even talk to the candidates first, but just get the names over so they can sit there. Then call the candidates to say, "Hey, got this opportunity," and try to sell them. So, uh,
That you just, what, Orlando, that's such a pet peeve of mine. When I started in this business 21 years ago as a rookie, I never forget hearing that people did that,
mhm,
like this bait and
yep,
switch of, here's his resume, here's this candidate that we have. But no, the candidate doesn't know anything about what's happening.
mhm,
Their poor resume was on Career Builder or Monster, and I'm dating myself. This is before LinkedIn.
right.
So, uh, and then it's a bait and switch. And so now, unfortunately, the client is getting bamboozled a bit. And then, they want to interview this candidate. Now, all of a sudden, they're not available anymore. Well, they never had the relationship to begin with. And actually, that leads me to what I have said to many clients. And I'll say here, everybody has a name, especially now with LinkedIn. You have an org chart at your fingertips.
Mhm,
We have the relationship.
mm. Love that. Love that. Love it. Let me ask you one last question around the candidate. So, is it that they're not looking because they're happy, or because this tech world in Tampa is so close that it could be risky for them if they start to throw their hat in the ring for a new opportunity? Or does that even matter?
Um, that's a really good question. I don't think it matters to most individual contributors. I think it definitely matters in leadership roles.
Mm,
I have quite a large portfolio of IT executives, from director up to the C-suite, that are passively on the market, but they
really?
don't want they'll never apply directly to a position, and they'll only work with a trusted recruiter like myself, because they trust that their resume isn't going to get spammed all over town, because you never know whose inbox it's going to be in.
Right.
So as I represent these types of candidates, I always tell them and I give them my word, and it's 100% true. You'll, I'll never spam your resume anywhere. It's I don't understand the process of doing that anyway, because if I'm just throwing a resume all over town, um, how do we know there's a good match there? We don't even really know. I mean, I guess you can entice somebody with a great resume and some buzzwords there and in an email, but until you know all of the things, which that's why to me recruiting is much more of an art than
Mhm.
as well as a science of process and metrics, because there has to be a good fit and a good marriage.
Yep.
And you don't know those things until you know what's motivating a candidate, what they're interested in, what appeals to them. If I sent one person's resume to 200 companies and then a company reaches back out to me, wants to interview them, that doesn't mean the candidate's going to want to interview with you. So for me, I still sort of work in an old school way of picking up the phone, or we're sending an email, but not with the resume, more of I'm representing somebody that looks like this,
Right.
and giving them a little, a bird's eye view into this person's background and industry, why I think it might be an interesting candidate to consider. And also then finding out what's happening with that particular organization and their hiring needs, because just seeing job descriptions on their career page doesn't tell me anything about the job itself. I mean, I know the skill set they're looking for, but sometimes that's not even true. Uh,
True.
Sometimes you see a position out there. I'll give you an example. I've seen this happen more times than not. Somebody loses a valuable member of the team, and that person's been there, let's say, over 5 years. So the job description that is posted has to do with that person's role, the way, all the things that they learned over the course of 5 years being on that team. But you'll never find that same set of skills from the
Exactly.
outside, right? So, this is what gets me. It's we're looking for a .NET developer, and we're looking for some DevOps experience, and we're looking for some automation, testing automation experience. And oh, by the way, if they have Python, that's great as well. And so I oftentimes start conversations with, okay, what's important here? Because there's 4 people in this one job description. Which that doesn't exist.
Exactly.
I mean, there are unicorns out there for certain things, but that's typically not, you're not going to find that. So let's break this down. And oftentimes hiring managers say, I don't know why that job's posted out there like that. I don't know why that job description is like that. So that's another reason why, as a recruiter, you should be wary of blasting a job description like that
Mhm.
out to so many candidates, because the two thoughts from a candidate, from a developer, are, or anybody, I don't want to just use developers, but testers, scrum masters, business analysts, data architects, business intelligence folks. If there's too many things going on in this job description, their mindset is, oh, I don't have all that experience, so I'm not going to be a fit for that, so I'm not even going to respond to the recruiter. Or, well, that company is dumb because they're trying to hire 5 people, and they want 5 different technology skill sets into one person.
Right.
So then they get like annoyed, and then they don't respond.
Right.
So right, it's like you can't look at somebody's resume and know their whole story, and you can't look at a job description and know the whole story there.
Exactly. Yeah. And especially when it comes to job descriptions, it's this part of it is the crucial skill sets needed, and then the rest is the wish list. But what was key that you said, and I don't know if I even said this publicly or just in meetings at different companies, is like, because someone started, 5 years ago and they personally grown that role, and now like that's what we want. It's like, well, no, that person maybe did some personal development outside certifications and brought more to the table. Now you're saying you want that. And it's like, that's 5 different people. That's 2 different people. Right? You
Right.
can't look for that.
Like you could have hired a .NET developer on your team, and perhaps you had some PHP legacy products over here
Hmm.
that .NET developer, maybe you lost this other PHP resource, and so this one .NET developer, is goes above and beyond, and I'm going to learn, that language. I'm going to learn how to be able to add some features to this or maintain it or, do some production support on that product. But I'm still a .NET developer, but I gained that experience. But those two things don't normally go together. So then if you lose that resource and you expect a new person to have both of those skill sets, kind of setting yourself up for failure. And you're also not representing your company and team in the best way that you can, because again, the talent has a lot of choices. And if a role doesn't make sense to them, they're moving on. I mean, it's amazing how many candidates we talked to that today. In fact, I had a situation where we have a candidate would take less money for one role over another role that was paying more. But it's because there was a lot more information that we could provide. That hiring manager has spent time with me personally to go through their pains. What's the reason that they lost the person? What's really happening? What's the future? What's the potential trajectory of somebody coming into this role? Maybe it's not super sexy, but there are other avenues for this person to grow. But those conversations don't happen that much between recruiters and candidates. Again, it's a quick and dirty 15-minute. Do you check all these things off of off the list? And what's interesting is candidates do allow themselves to be interviewed in that way sometimes, because they're just, let me get in front of the hiring manager, because they're dismissing the recruiter's expertise, but that's because they haven't worked with a really good recruiter yet.
Right. Yep. That's a good point. Well, I definitely want to be mindful of your time, Angelica. If you can't share with job seekers, well, I don't know if you even need job seekers calling you or share with employers, share with candidates, share with both employers and job seekers how to reach out to you over at StevenDouglas.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, please look me up and connect with me on LinkedIn. Just Angelica Chadwick at StevenDouglas, but also my email address, achadwick@StevenDouglas.com. You could reach me that way. I do respond sometimes, not right away. Be patient, I would say, for anybody that is trying to reach out. And also mindful and okay with maybe sometimes of me introducing you to one of the recruiters on my team. We're all very, very seasoned. The one thing I will say about StevenDouglas is that we don't hire anybody that has less than 5 years in the business. So we're very tenured. We really understand the roles that we're recruiting for. I say sometimes 20 years in IT, I feel like I have a PhD in technology. Yep. I know enough to be dangerous and have very meaningful, understanding conversations. But just like the candidates are being inundated by recruiters are also being inundated as well.
Wow. Well, again, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your friendship, your knowledge, and everything like that. So as we progress, I wanted to bring you back on in early next year to see what's changed, if anything has changed throughout going through 2 years of COVID. And what that market looks like now. But again, Angelica, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your knowledge and expertise.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure to spend my evening with you. I'll do it anytime. And I would love to come back in the beginning of next year to see where things stand. I'll be interested to kind of take a look back as well. And I value you and our friendship as well. And just have lots of respect for you in the business and what you've done for yourself professionally.
Thank you so much. Hold on one second. I'm going to just close this out.
Okay.
Music.